60 seconds. That's how long it took for a telegram to travel from Wellington, Washington to Seattle and back on March 1st, 1915. 60 seconds of electrical pulses through copper wire. 1,000 lives depended on those pulses reaching their destination. The telegram was 3 words long. Slide coming. Evacuate. The telegrapher who sent it violated direct orders from his supervisor. If the supervisor who'd tried to stop him was following company policy designed to prevent panic and protect railroad property. The decision to send that telegram anyway created the largest civilian evacuation in Pacific Northwest history and saved nearly everyone in Wellington when an avalanche buried the town 43 minutes later. The telegrapher was fired. The people he saved erected a monument to him 30 years after the fact. His supervisor lived the rest of his life knowing he'd been technically correct and morally catastrophic. Wellington, Washington existed because the Great Northern Railway needed a station at the western portal of the Cascade Tunnel. The town sat at 3,000 feet elevation on a steep mountainside where winter snowfall regularly exceeded 400 inches. Great Northern built worker housing, a station building, a roundhouse, and supporting infrastructure. By 1915, roughly 1,000 people lived there. Railroad workers and their families, support staff for the hotel and general store, section crews maintaining track through the mountains. The winter of 1914 to 1915 brought exceptional snow. By late February, snowpack exceeded normal seasonal totals. The railroad operated rotary snowplows continuously to keep the main line open through Cascade Tunnel. Trains moved slowly, often delayed for hours while crews cleared slides. On February 23rd, a series of smaller avalanches blocked the line west of Wellington. Our 2 passenger trains, the Seattle Express and the Spokane Local, stopped at Wellington to wait for clearing operations. The trains carried approximately 150 passengers and crew. Company policy for avalanche conditions was clear. Keep trains moving if possible, but once stopped at a station, protect railroad property and maintain schedule integrity. Don't evacuate towns preemptively. Don't create panic. Avalanches were routine in mountain railroading. Wellington had experienced dozens of slides over the years. The town had never been hit directly. The slope above Wellington was considered stable, steep but forested, which meant the trees would anchor snow. The 2 stranded trains sat on the main line next to Wellington's station platform for 6 days. Passengers grew restless. Some wanted to hike down the mountain to safety. Company officials discouraged this. The descent was dangerous in deep snow, and abandoning railroad property meant lost revenue. The trains would move as soon as the line cleared. Crews worked around the clock. Progress was slow but steady. March 1st brought rain. A warm, heavy rain at 3,000 feet elevation. The rain fell on snowpack that had accumulated continuously for weeks. Surface snow began absorbing water, growing heavier. The rain also created a weak layer between old snow and new precipitation, a lubricated surface where the entire snowpack could potentially slide. Railroad workers recognized the danger. Several section crew foremen reported their concerns to the station master. The slope above Wellington was showing signs of instability. Small sloughs, a snow settling with audible cracks, trees leaning downslope under snow load. The station master called a meeting at 2 p.m. on March 1st. Attending were the senior railroad officials stranded with the trains, section crew foreman, and the telegraph operator, a 23-year-old man named James Bascom. The discussion focused on whether to evacuate Wellington and move the trains to a different location, even if it meant backing them east into the tunnel for safety. Except the ranking railroad official, a division superintendent named Donald Jackson, opposed evacuation. His reasoning followed company policy and operational logic. Evacuating 1,000 people in a rainstorm through deep snow created more danger than the theoretical risk of an avalanche. The trains couldn't be moved without clearance from the dispatcher in Seattle, and moving them into the tunnel would block that tunnel for all traffic. Previous slides had never hit Wellington directly. The forested slope provided natural avalanche protection. Evacuating would create panic, potentially injure people during the evacuation itself, and look like incompetent management if nothing happened. Jackson ordered everyone to remain in place. The trains would stay. Wellington would not evacuate. James Bascom had worked for Great Northern for 4 years. He knew telegraph operations, understood railroad procedure, and respected chain of command. He also lived in Wellington with his wife and infant daughter. After the meeting ended, Bascom returned to the telegraph office and watched the rain. The slope above town was now sliding continuously in small sloughs. Trees were visibly bending. At 3:17 p.m., a section foreman arrived at the telegraph office and said quietly, "It's going to go. The whole face. I've seen it before in Alaska. When it goes, it'll take everything." Company procedure required all telegraph messages to be approved by a supervisor before transmission. Bascom's supervisor was the station master, who reported to Jackson. Sending an unauthorized evacuation order would be immediate grounds for dismissal and potentially blacklisting from railroad employment. Bascom had a family to support. Jobs were not easy to find in 1915. Violating direct orders from a division superintendent was career suicide. At 3:43 p.m., Bascom walked to his house, told his wife to pack immediately, and returned to the telegraph office. At 3:45 p.m., he sent a telegram to the Great Northern dispatcher in Seattle. "Slide coming. Evacuate." The message violated every protocol. It hadn't been authorized. It contradicted the superintendent's explicit orders. It would cause panic and operational disruption. The Seattle dispatcher, receiving an emergency message from a station operator, immediately contacted Great Northern's Seattle office. Company officials, assuming the message had been authorized by the superintendent on site, issued an evacuation order. At 3:47 p.m., the return telegram arrived at Wellington. "Evacuation authorized. We'll clear the town." The station master read the telegram and immediately sought out Superintendent Jackson. Jackson was furious. He confronted Bascom at the telegraph office at 3:52 p.m. The confrontation was brief and loud. Jackson demanded to know who authorized the message. Bascom stated he had sent it on his own authority. Jackson told him he was fired and ordered him to stop the evacuation. Bascom refused. Jackson physically moved toward the telegraph key to send a countermanding order. On what happened next is documented in multiple witness statements from the subsequent investigation. The section foreman who had warned Bascom earlier stepped into the telegraph office and said to Jackson, "Let him send it." Jackson turned to order the foreman out. The foreman didn't move. Jackson repeated the order. The foreman said, "Sir, I've worked mountains for 20 years. That slope is going to slide. If you stop this evacuation, you're killing everyone here, and I'm not going to watch that happen." Jackson had authority. The foreman had expertise. Authority won procedurally, but lost practically. Jackson left the telegraph office without countermanding the evacuation, but also without authorizing it. The evacuation proceeded in administrative limbo, happening but not officially sanctioned. Evacuating 1,000 people in heavy rain through deep snow with 43 minutes warning was chaos managed barely. Railroad workers and section crews took charge, so families were directed downslope away from the avalanche path. Passengers from the stranded trains were moved into the safest available structures. Some people refused to leave their homes. Others panicked and needed physical assistance. The two trains couldn't be moved. No authorization had been given to enter the tunnel, and the crew didn't want to risk blocking it without orders. At 4:28 p.m., the avalanche released. The entire snowpack above Wellington, estimated at several million tons, slid as a single mass. The slide accelerated down the slope, gaining speed and mass, breaking through the forest that was supposed to provide protection. The avalanche struck Wellington at approximately 80 miles per hour. It buried the town under 40 feet of snow and debris. It pushed the two stranded trains 150 feet down the mountainside before burying them completely. The death toll was 96. All 96 were people who hadn't evacuated, either refusing to leave or unable to reach safety in the available time. The 96 included Superintendent Jackson, and who had remained with the trains to protect railroad property. It included several railroad workers who stayed behind to operate equipment. It included families who didn't believe the danger or couldn't get out fast enough. It included passengers who chose to stay with their belongings on the trains. 904 people survived because they evacuated. The evacuation had taken 38 minutes from the order to the last person leaving the danger zone, while the margin between survival and death was 5 minutes. The avalanche arrived 43 minutes after Bascom's telegram, 38 minutes after evacuation began. If Jackson had successfully stopped the evacuation, the death toll would have been roughly 1,000 instead of 96. James Bascom was fired on March 2, 1915. The termination letter cited insubordination and unauthorized use of telegraph facilities. He was blacklisted from railroad employment. He found work as a general store clerk in Seattle, and his wife later said he never spoke about the avalanche, except to say he wished he'd sent the telegram earlier. The Great Northern Railway investigation concluded that Superintendent Jackson had followed proper procedure and that the avalanche was an unforeseeable natural disaster. No fault was assigned to company policy. The investigation acknowledged that Bascom's unauthorized action had facilitated evacuation, but noted that unauthorized actions, even when accidentally beneficial, could not be condoned, and the railroad couldn't operate if workers routinely violated orders based on personal judgment. The survivors disagreed. In 1945, 30 years after the avalanche, the former residents of Wellington erected a monument. The monument listed 96 names, those who died, and carried an inscription, saved by 3 words. James Bascom's name was carved below the inscription. He attended the dedication but left before the ceremony. He died in 1952. The larger questions remained unresolved. Should Bascom have sent the telegram? Obviously, yes, in hindsight. He saved 900 lives, but evaluated by the information available before the avalanche, he had violated direct orders based on the warning of one section foreman against the judgment of a senior superintendent. If the avalanche hadn't come, Bascom would have been the railroad worker who created chaos and cost the company thousands in operational delays for no reason. Should Jackson have allowed the evacuation? Obviously, yes, in hindsight. But Jackson had responsibility for maintaining operations, protecting property, preventing panic, and following procedures designed through decades of mountain railroad experience. Evacuating every time conditions looked dangerous would make mountain railroading impossible. Previous avalanches hadn't hit Wellington. The slope had forest protection. Jackson made the conservative operational decision. The Wellington avalanche of 1915 was the deadliest avalanche disaster in United States history. The Great Northern Railway abandoned the town after the slide and rerouted the line through a longer tunnel. The town site was renamed Ty after the nearby Ty River. The name Wellington had become too associated with disaster. The new name didn't erase what happened. 60 seconds to send 3 words. 43 minutes until impact. 96 dead. 904 saved. One man fired for the insubordination that prevented a massacre. One man dead following the procedures that would have killed everyone. Neither was wrong by the standards they were judged against. Both were irreversibly right or wrong by the standard that actually mattered: who survived.